The massive hall of the Galactic Defense Academy stretched out like a crystal cathedral, its walls gleaming with alien metals that seemed to shift color in the strange purple light. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy filled the space, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and growls that would have terrified most humans. But Rachel Stone stood perfectly still in the center of it all, watching everything with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen worse things before breakfast. She was the first human ever accepted into the academy, and everyone knew it. Conversation stopped when she walked by. Six-armed creatures pointed at her with multiple appendages while whispering in languages that sounded like breaking glass. Flying jellyfish-like beings hovered overhead, their bioluminescent bodies pulsing faster whenever she moved. Even the plant people seemed to lean away from her, their leaf-covered faces rustling with what might have been fear. Rachel understood why they were nervous. Earth had a reputation out here among the stars, and it wasn't a good one. The other species called it a Deathworld, a planet so hostile that nothing should be able to live there, let alone thrive. They knew about the crushing gravity, the poisonous atmosphere, the deadly weather, and the creatures that hunted in packs. What they didn't understand was that all of this had made humans into something they weren't prepared for. Across the hall, she noticed a group of tall, gray-skinned warriors watching her with obvious interest. They belonged to the Hegemony, a military empire that had conquered half the galaxy through pure strength and aggression. Their leader was massive even by their standards, standing nearly 8 feet tall with arms like tree trunks and claws that could probably cut through steel. Scars covered his visible skin, each one a story of some battle he had won. His name was Krill, and he had been talking about the human for the past hour. His fellow warriors surrounded him, hanging on every word as he described what he planned to do to put this upstart species in its place. In hegemony culture, strength was everything, and strength was proven through physical dominance. The weak served the strong, and there was no shame in establishing the natural order of things. Watch and learn, Krill told his companions as he began walking toward Rachel. These soft-skinned creatures think they can stand with real warriors. I will show them how wrong they are. The other cadets sensed something was about to happen. Conversations died down as beings turned to watch the approaching confrontation. Some of the smaller species actually moved away, not wanting to be caught in whatever was coming. The tension in the air grew thick enough to cut. Rachel noticed him coming long before he reached her, but she didn't move or change expression. She had dealt with bullies before, though usually they were human bullies who didn't have claws and weren't twice her size. Still, the principle was the same. Show fear, and they would own you forever. Stand your ground, and sometimes they would back down. Sometimes they wouldn't, but that was a problem she would deal with when it happened. So you are the Deathworld creature everyone speaks of, Krill said, his voice deep enough to rattle the floor. He spoke in standard Galactic, but his accent made the words sound like grinding metal. You do not look like much to me. Perhaps the stories about your world are just stories after all. Without warning, he reached out to grab her shoulder. In hegemony culture, this was a traditional dominance move, a way of showing everyone watching who was in charge. The victim was supposed to stand there and accept it, proving their lower status. It was how their society worked, how challenges were issued and hierarchies established. Rachel had other ideas. The moment his clawed hand touched her shoulder, she moved with a speed that seemed impossible. Her right hand shot up and grabbed his wrist while her left struck his elbow joint. At the same time, she stepped forward and swept his leg with her foot. The combination of moves happened so fast that most of the watching aliens missed the details. 1 second Krill was standing over her. The next he was face down on the polished floor with his arm bent at an angle that made several observers make sounds of distress. Instructor Veltar, a being made of living crystal who served as their orientation guide, had been in the middle of explaining academy rules when the confrontation began. His crystalline body could shift and change shape faster than most organic beings could think, allowing him to break up fights before they started. But even he was caught off guard by the sheer speed of what happened. By the time his form had begun to change, the fight was already over. The entire hall went completely silent. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds all stopped what they were doing to stare at the impossible scene before them. A human, barely 5.5 feet tall and weighing maybe 130 pounds, had just taken down a hegemony warrior who outweighed her by at least 100 pounds and had been fighting battles since before she was born. "Don't touch without permission," Rachel said in a quiet voice that somehow carried across the entire hall. She released Krill's arm and took a step back, her posture relaxed and unthreatening. She might as well have been commenting on the weather for all the emotion she showed. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever, but was probably only 3 seconds. Then the nervous chatter exploded across the room like a dam bursting, as hundreds of beings all tried to process what they had just witnessed and share their thoughts with anyone who would listen. News traveled fast in a place where beings could communicate through telepathy, pheromone clouds, and electromagnetic pulses. By the time Rachel Stone sat down for her first meal in the academy cafeteria, every single cadet knew exactly what had happened in the orientation hall. The story grew with each telling, as stories always do, but the basic facts remained same. A human had put a hegemony warrior on the ground faster than most people could blink. The cafeteria was a marvel of alien engineering, designed to accommodate the dietary needs of dozens of different species. Some tables were filled with liquid nutrients for aquatic beings, while others held what looked like glowing rocks for silicon-based life forms. The air itself was divided into different atmospheric zones so everyone could breathe comfortably. But despite all this careful planning for diversity, Rachel noticed that every conversation seemed to stop when she walked by. She found an empty table near a group of insectoid beings who were making clicking sounds that might have been laughter. As she sat down with her tray of what the food dispenser had assured her was safe for human consumption, she caught fragments of conversation from nearby tables. Her name came up again and again, along with words like impossible, dangerous, and Deathworld. Across the room, Krill sat with his fellow hegemony warriors, his arm in a medical brace that glowed with healing energy. His pride hurt worse than his twisted joint, but he was trying not to show it. In his culture, showing weakness after defeat was almost as bad as a defeat itself. His companions spoke in hushed tones about what they had witnessed, trying to understand how something so small had moved so fast. Perhaps she used some kind of technology, suggested one of them, a female warrior named Vex who had scars across her face from a battle on the Rim Worlds. The humans are known for their clever devices. Krill shook his massive head. I felt no energy fields, no hidden weapons. That was pure physical ability. He flexed his injured arm, wincing slightly. I have fought creatures twice my size and won. I have battled in the acid rains of Zirion and the ice storms of Polar 7. But I have never seen anything move like that. As the days passed, Krill found himself watching Rachel whenever their training schedules overlapped. He told himself it was to understand his enemy, to find weaknesses he could exploit in a future encounter. But the truth was more complicated than that. He was fascinated by what he saw, even though it challenged everything he had been taught about strength and combat. The morning conditioning sessions were particularly revealing. The Academy used enhanced gravity fields to push cadets beyond their normal limits, gradually increasing the pull until most species struggled to even stand upright. At 1.2 times standard gravity, the insectoid beings moved like they were walking through thick mud. The plant people's leaves drooped and their movements became sluggish. Even some of the stronger species, like the rock-skinned Gorlax, began to show signs of strain. Rachel jogged through the enhanced gravity zone like she was running through a park on a sunny day. Her breathing remained steady, her movements fluid and relaxed. She even carried on a casual conversation with her roommate Beth, a blue-skinned centurion who was struggling just to keep up despite having 4 legs. So I was thinking we could visit the entertainment district this weekend, Rachel said, not even slightly out of breath. I heard there's this place that does virtual reality experiences from different worlds. Beth gasped out a reply between labored breaths. Sounds great, but maybe pick something that doesn't involve running or fighting. I think I'm going to be sore for a week after this. The obstacle course was even more impressive to watch. The Academy had designed it to test reflexes, agility, and combat awareness using a series of spinning blades, energy barriers, and projectile weapons set to training mode. Most cadets approached it with a serious concentration of beings whose lives depended on perfect timing. One mistake could mean painful injuries, even with the safety protocols in place. Rachel treated the entire course like it was a game. She ducked under spinning blades that moved fast enough to blur, weaved between energy barriers with inches to spare, and caught projectiles out of the air with casual ease. Her movements had a flowing quality that made everything look effortless, as if the deadly obstacles were moving in slow motion just for her benefit. But what really disturbed Krill was how she reacted to the psychological warfare simulations. These were carefully designed to trigger fear responses in different species, using combinations of sounds, smells, and visual effects that represented their deepest evolutionary nightmares. Most cadets emerged from the chambers pale and shaken, having barely maintained their sanity against whatever horrors the computer had thrown at them. Rachel walked out of her first session with a puzzled expression on her face. "That's it?" she asked the technician, a many-tentacled being whose skin changed colors with its emotions. "The roaring sounds reminded me of camping trips with my family. We used to hear mountain lions at night, but they never bothered us if we kept the fire going." The technician's skin flashed confused patterns of yellow and green. But the simulation included the hunting calls of the void stalkers of Nightmare Prime. They are considered the most terrifying predators in known space. Rachel shrugged. "They sounded like really big cats to me. Back home, we have things called bears that make similar noises, except they are smart enough to use tools, and they can run 30 miles an hour uphill." Word of this conversation spread through the academy like wildfire, adding another layer to the growing legend of the human who treated their worst fears like childhood memories. Beings who had never given much thought to Earth began researching the planet's wildlife, and what they found kept many of them awake during their sleep cycles. 3 days of watching Rachel move through training exercises like they were children's games had pushed Krill past his breaking point. Every night, he lay in his quarters staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment in the orientation hall when she had put him on the ground so easily. His fellow warriors tried to console him, telling him it was just luck, that humans were known for their tricks and deceptions. But Krill had felt her strength firsthand, had seen the casual way she treated challenges that would break most beings. The breaking point came during combat training when Rachel sparred with a Zephyrian battle drone, a mechanical opponent designed to test reflexes and combat skills. The drone moved with inhuman speed and precision, its multiple arms wielding energy weapons that could stun or disorient an opponent. Most cadets lasted maybe 2 minutes against it before being overwhelmed. Rachel danced around the machine for 15 minutes, treating it like a particularly energetic dance partner. She didn't even seem to be trying hard, occasionally pausing to adjust her ponytail or wipe sweat from her forehead while the drone spun and slashed at empty air. When she finally decided to end the match, she simply grabbed 2 of its arms, spun it around like a child's toy, and gently placed it on the ground in a position where it couldn't move. "Thanks for the work, Kate," she told the confused machine before walking away to grab a towel. That evening, Krill stood up in the center of the common area where cadets from all species gathered to relax and socialize. The room was filled with beings playing games, sharing stories, or simply enjoying each other's company. Conversations died down as the massive warrior raised his voice to address the entire room. "Human," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the space. "Rachel Stone of the Deathworld called Earth. I challenge you to single combat in the most dangerous simulation this academy offers." The room went completely silent. Even the background hum of the air recycling system seemed to quiet down, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Rachel looked up from a book she was reading, a physical paper book that had fascinated several alien species who had never seen such primitive information storage. "Which simulation?" she asked calmly, as if people challenged her to deadly combat every day. "Survival Scenario 7 Alpha," Krill announced, and gasps echoed around the room. "The furnace world. Just you and me, no teams, no backup. We see who the better warrior really is." If the room had been quiet before, now it was tomb silent. Scenario 7 Alpha was legendary throughout the academy, whispered about in corners and used as a threat by instructors when cadets weren't taking their training seriously. It simulated conditions on Hell's Cape Prime, a world so hostile that even the Galactic Council had classified it as unsurvivable. The simulation was so dangerous that most species required full environmental suits just to enter it, and even then, the average survival time was measured in minutes. Within seconds of Krill's challenge, cadets throughout the room were placing bets using their personal communicators. The odds started heavily in favor of the hegemony warrior. After all, he had decades of combat experience, had personally conquered 12 different worlds, and had survived battles that would have killed most beings 10 times over. Rachel was impressive for a human, but she was still just one small person from a backwater planet. But as word spread about her previous performances, the odds began to shift. Beings who had watched her treat the Academy's deadliest challenges like casual entertainment started putting their money on the human. The betting pool grew larger by the hour, eventually involving cadets from other training facilities across the galaxy who placed bets remotely after hearing the news. The next morning, both challengers stood in the preparation chamber adjacent to the simulation room. The contrast between them was striking and almost comical. Krill wore full hegemony battle armor, a massive suit of powered metal that increased his strength, protected him from environmental hazards, and contained enough life support systems to keep him alive in the vacuum of space. The armor alone weighed more than Rachel did, and its built-in weapon system could level a small building. Rachel stood beside him wearing standard academy training gear, lightweight clothing designed for flexibility and comfort. She had a basic breathing mask, a utility belt with some emergency supplies, and a pair of sturdy boots. That was it. No armor, no powered systems, no advanced life support. She looked like she was getting ready for a hike in the woods rather than entering one of the deadliest simulations ever created. "You sure about this?" Rachel asked, checking her gear one final time. "I mean, it's not too late to call it off. Nobody would think less of you." Krill's response rumbled through his armor speakers like distant thunder. "I have conquered 12 worlds, human. I have fought in the acid storms of Venom Prime, and the ice hurricanes of frozen death. I have killed creatures that your nightmares could not imagine. I will not be embarrassed by some primitive from a backwater planet." Rachel shrugged. "Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you." The simulation chamber door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure, revealing a wall of heat that made even Krill's armor systems work harder. The air shimmered with toxic gases that would have killed most organic life in seconds. Gravity immediately increased to crushing levels that made every step an effort. And somewhere in the distance, something roared with a sound like tearing metal. "Simulation beginning in 3, 2, 1, announced the computer's neutral voice. The chamber filled with a hellish environment of the most dangerous world in known space, and both challengers stepped forward into what most beings would have considered certain death. The real test was about to begin. The first hour of the simulation had been pure chaos. The moment they stepped into the hellish environment, the temperature soared to levels that would have boiled water on most worlds. The air was thick with poisonous gases that burned through filters and ate away at metal. Gravity crushed down on them with 3 times the force they were used to, making every movement a struggle against an invisible weight trying to drag them into the toxic soil. Krill had immediately activated all his armor's defensive systems, sealing himself inside what was essentially a walking tank. His heads-up display flashed warning after warning as a hostile environment attacked his protection from every angle. Acid rain began falling almost immediately, sizzling against his armor's outer shell with a sound like bacon in a pan. In the distance, something howled with a voice that seemed to come from night maze. Rachel had simply looked around, taken a deep breath of the filtered air from a basic mask, and started walking toward a cluster of strange rock formations as if she was taking a stroll through a park. By the second hour, things had gotten worse. The acid rain intensified until it came down in sheets that could eat through most metals. The ground itself seemed to be alive, occasionally opening up into pits filled with creatures that looked like they were made of pure hunger. The local wildlife had taken notice of the intruders and began stalking them through the perpetual twilight that passed for daylight on this nightmare world. Krill's armor was holding up, but barely. His power systems were working overtime just to keep the life support functioning. Every step was a battle against the crushing gravity, and he could feel his strength being drained away minute by minute. He had fought on hostile world before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just dangerous. It was active and malicious, as if the planet itself wanted everything on it to die. Rachel, meanwhile, had found some kind of cave system and disappeared inside. Krill lost sight of her completely, which only added to his growing anxiety. In his experience, losing track of your opponent in a hostile environment usually meant you were about to be attacked from an unexpected direction. The third hour brought disaster. A massive creature, something like a cross between a rhinoceros and a bulldozer with too many teeth, came charging out of the toxic fog straight at Krill. His armor's weapon systems engaged automatically, sending energy blasts that would have leveled buildings. The creature barely slowed down. When it hit him, the impact sent him flying backward into a cliff face that immediately began collapsing. Tons of rock came crashing down, pinning him under debris that his failing armor couldn't lift. The caustic rain poured down through the gaps, finding weak points in his protection and beginning to eat away at the metal. His heads-up display showed system failures cascading throughout his suit. He was trapped, his armor was dying, and the hostile environment was slowly working its way inside to kill him. That was when Rachel appeared. She emerged from the rock pile like she had simply walked through solid stone, moving easily despite the crushing gravity that had been grinding Krill down for hours. Her basic gear looked no worse for wear, and she seemed completely unbothered by the acid rain that was slowly dissolving his armor. She took one look at his situation and immediately began lifting chunks of rock that should have been impossible for someone her size to move. "I don't understand," Krill gasped as she effortlessly removed a boulder that weighed several tons. His voice came out distorted through his damaged helmet speakers. "This gravity is 3 times standard. The toxin should have killed you hours ago. How are you even breathing?" Rachel paused in her rock moving to give him a look that might have been amusement. "Back home, we call this Tuesday," she said, as if that explained everything. She went back to clearing debris with casual efficiency. "Earth's gravity is actually heavier than this. Our atmosphere has oxygen levels that will be toxic to most species. Plus, we've got all kinds of fun stuff floating around like industrial pollutants and natural radiation." She lifted another massive rock and tossed it aside like it was made of foam. "As for breathing, this air is actually cleaner than what I grew up with in downtown Detroit. At least here the smog isn't mixed with car exhaust and factory smoke." Krill felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of the universe as she pulled him free from the debris. His armor was a wreck, sparks flying from damaged systems, but Rachel helped him to his feet with the same casual ease she had shown throughout the entire ordeal. She didn't even seem tired. "The predators," he managed to say, gesturing weakly at the shapes that had been circling them in the distance. Throughout the simulation, he had caught glimpses of creatures that moved like living nightmares, things with too many claws and teeth designed by evolution to kill everything they encountered. Rachel glanced over at the prowling monsters and actually smiled. "Those guys? They remind me of my neighbor's German shepherd, Rex. He was always trying to look tough, but if you threw a stick, he'd go chase it like a puppy." As if to prove a point, one of the predators let out a roar that echoed across the wasteland. "See? That's exactly the noise Rex made when he wanted attention." As she began treating his wounds with supplies she had somehow made from local plants, using techniques that seemed impossibly advanced for someone from primitive world, Krill finally understood what everyone had missed. Humans weren't just tough by accident. They were the end result of millions of years of evolution on a planet that had spent every single day trying to kill them. Other species had evolved on worlds that were merely challenging. Humans had evolved on a world that was actively hostile to life itself. They didn't conquer dangerous planets because they were warriors. They conquered dangerous planets because, to them, every other world in the galaxy was a vacation resort compared to home. The simulation around them continued its assault, acid rain falling, gravity crushing, predators stalking. But for the first time since entering this nightmare, Krill felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt safe, because he was with a human, and humans were the only species in the galaxy that considered hell to be home sweet home. The final hour of the simulation turned into something that would be talked about in the Academy for decades to come. With Krill's armor completely dead and his systems failing, Rachel had essentially become his life support system. She fashioned a breathing apparatus from materials she found in the hostile environment, created protective coverings from the hides of creatures that had tried to eat them, and somehow managed to keep both of them alive in conditions that should have killed them 10 times over. But the real spectacle began when they started moving toward the extraction point. The simulation's designers had programmed the local predators to become more aggressive as time went on, simulating the way real creatures on hostile worlds would eventually overcome their initial caution and attack in groups. What emerged from the toxic fog were 3 of the largest apex predators a computer could generate, creatures that looked like they had been designed by committee in hell itself. Each one stood 12 feet tall at the shoulder, with armored hides that could deflect energy weapons and claws that could tear through spaceship hulls. They had been based on actual creatures from worlds so dangerous that even the Galactic Council had banned exploration missions there. Their eyes glowed with predatory intelligence, and they moved with the coordinated precision of pack hunters who had never known defeat. Rachel looked at them approaching, and sighed like someone who had just been asked to take out the garbage. "Stay behind me," she told Krill, who was leaning heavily on her shoulder for support. "And try not to bleed too much. The smell makes them excited." She had fashioned a spear from materials she had found earlier, a simple weapon that looked primitive compared to the high-tech armaments most species used. But as the first predator charged, covering ground with terrifying speed, Rachel moved with that same fluid grace that had put Krill on the ground days earlier. The spear seemed to extend her reach by impossible amounts. She struck with surgical precision, finding weak points in the creature's armor that shouldn't have been visible to the naked eye. The monster's charge turned into a stumble, then a crash, as it went down with a wound that would have required a medical team to inflict with conventional weapons. The second predator tried to circle around while its packmate was falling, but Rachel was already turning to meet it. She moved like she could see the future, always in the right place at the right time, always striking at the exact moment when her target was most vulnerable. The creature's claws whistled through the air where she had been standing a fraction of a second before, while her spear found gaps between armor plates with the precision of a master surgeon. The third predator, seeing its packmates fall, tried a different approach. It began stalking them, staying just out of range while looking for an opening. Rachel simply ignored it and continued helping Krill toward the extraction point, occasionally glancing back to make sure the creature was still following at a respectful distance. "Why isn't it attacking?" Krill gasped, his damaged armor making walking difficult even with Rachel's support. "Because it's smart," Rachel replied matter-of-factly. "It knows I could have killed it already if I wanted to. Right now, it's hoping we'll leave its territory without a fight." She glanced back at the massive predator, which immediately took a step backward. Back home, mountain lions do the same thing. They'll follow you for miles just to make sure you're really leaving, but they won't actually attack unless they are desperate. The extraction point was a simple platform that would teleport them back to the academy when the simulation ended. As they approached it, the countdown timer in the corner of their vision showed 30 seconds remaining. The third predator seemed to sense that its opportunity was running out and began moving closer, building up courage for one final attack. Rachel set Krill down gently on the extraction platform and turned to face the approaching monster. For a moment, human and alien predators stared at each other across the toxic wasteland. Then Rachel took one step forward, and the creature immediately backed away, lowering its head in what any animal behaviorist would recognize as a submission gesture. "Good boy," Rachel said, and could have sworn the creature's tail tried to wag. The simulation ended with a flash of light, and suddenly they were standing in the clean, bright debriefing chamber surrounded by dozens of shocked observers. The observation deck above them was packed with cadets, instructors, and even some academy officials who had heard about the challenge and come to watch what everyone expected to be a one-sided slaughter. The silence in the room was absolute. In the history of the Academy, no one had ever completed Scenario 7 Alpha without losing at least one team member. Most attempts ended with total casualties within the first hour. But here stood a human who had not only survived but had actually thrived in an environment that was designed to be unsurvivable. Krill's damaged armor sparked and hissed as its systems finally gave up completely. But despite his injuries, despite the fact that his pride had been shattered more thoroughly than his equipment, he immediately dropped to one knee in the traditional hegemony gesture of absolute submission. "I formally request assignment to your unit, Commander Stone," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "My blade, my strength, my life are yours to command." The gasps from the observation deck were audible even through the supposedly soundproof barrier. In the entire history of the hegemony, no warrior had ever voluntarily submitted to a member of another species. Their culture was built on the idea that strength determined hierarchy, and that hegemony warriors were the strongest beings in the galaxy. Rachel looked down at the massive warrior kneeling before her, and for a moment, her expression was unreadable. Then she reached down and helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as his damaged armor made standing difficult. "Get up, Carl," she said, using the human approximation of his name that had become popular among the other cadets. "We're partners, not master and servant. Besides, you did pretty well in there for someone who's never been camping." Instructor Veltar, whose crystalline form had been flickering with what other species had learned to recognize as extreme surprise, began updating his records. In his official report, he noted that this marked the first time in Academy history that a hegemony warrior had willingly accepted subordinate status to another species, and that the entire exchange had taken less time than most beings needed to process what they were seeing. As word of what had happened spread through the galactic communication networks, military strategists and xenobiologists across the galaxy began reassessing everything they thought they knew about humans and their potential role in galactic society. The age of human integration, it seemed, was going to be far more interesting than anyone had anticipated. And somewhere in the Academy's archives, a simple note was added to Rachel Stone's file. Recommend fast-track promotion to instructor level. Reason: student body appears to be learning more from her than from official curriculum. The human revolution had begun, not with weapons or politics, but with a girl from Earth who treated the galaxy's worst nightmare as just another Tuesday.